And that wasn't actually him.
No.
That was her again.
Yes.
How did you stop yourself from just like launching at her?
She wasn't there when they came home.
Fine, no.
I didn't feel compelled to meet him. I knew who he was. I knew who the family was.
Did you expect it to get as big as it did?
No way. Because I was like, there's a million podcasts out there, right?
The foresight with the story is insane. Like to be able to plot and be like, all right, if I say this at this point, then later on when I do this, I've got an excuse. 2009 was a historic year. Barack Obama became the first African-American president of the United States. The world mourned the loss of the king of pop, and Bitcoin's first ever transaction marked the dawn of cryptocurrency. But amid these defining historical moments, an online, almost insignificant friendship was quietly forming. One that by 2015 had deepened into something more, and by 2021 resulted in a landmark civil case, not only the UK's longest known catfishing case, but also the first successful civil claim of its kind. Now, like many of you who may have watched the documentary or listened to the podcast, I found this web of deception incredibly complex and quite honestly unbelievable. As a result, today we're joined by Kirat Assi, the victim at the center of this decade-long catfishing scandal that stunned the world. In this episode, we ask why she didn't question events that seemed preposterous, the biggest misconceptions about her story, and what she'd say to those who believe this could never happen to me. So let's get into it. Before we do go into the story and kind of what happened and everything else, I just want to get an idea of yourself. So what was your upbringing like? Where were you born? Kind of what were some of your memories growing up? Like, how was it for you when you look back at your childhood and your family? Like, what type of upbringing was it?
So I'm born and raised in West London, to first generation parents. And they're of Kenyan descent, both of them. And then my great-grandparents are pre-partition India, right? So Punjab there. And so I've had a very strong sort of Kenyan theme running through. But I'm born and raised here. I'm a British, Asian, Punjabi, Sikh, whatever you want to call it. So there's so many labels these days. But yeah, so I've been brought up here and I have really good memories of being brought up. So I'm in Hounslow, but then like Southall's not very far away. So, going to the Gurdwara, seeing all the Gurdwaras become what they are now from like, old shacks and scout hut buildings and, all that kind of stuff. So growing up at school, I'd say because my parents were first generation and it was that whole kind of, they didn't understand what it was like at school and all that kind of thing. So you had those issues at school growing up. But I was always very proud of who I was. So I didn't mind sticking out like a sore thumb sometimes, or I don't mind doing things differently. And by the time I got into secondary school, I was always doing things very active in the community, in society, in my schools, head girl. Both my schools actually, I was the first head girl in primary school and second year. So I was very...
A high achiever as well then.
Yeah, I don't like to say things like that because high achievers can go off and do nothing. Like,
of course, but at school, like as in we were put in these like silly classes that were like a year in, like as in they accelerate you and all this crazy stuff. It didn't necessarily work out in the long run in terms of it doesn't necessarily benefit you like the university or whatever. But it sounds like as in head girl, sounds like you were jumping through the hoops and kind of succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I put extra effort in.
Yeah.
But because I always wanted to do everything. So I played in orchestras, I sang in choirs, I did Punjabi class, I did Vajra lessons. I played viola, I played cello, I played all the recorders. I did everything: house dance, house drama. So I did.
Very creative then.
Very, very creative, and even then, we're talking about sort of producing shows and plays even from school going on into university then. So yeah, I was all doing all that kind of stuff way back before.
And then when you went to university, what did you study?
I did management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I kept it open, management at Aston, so yeah.
And then you ended up in marketing.
I first of all went into finance. And then initially I always wanted to be an actress, and I had an offer at the National Youth Theatre kind of thing. So I had an offer because our school had a partnership with them. They'd offered me a place. But obviously I was 15, mum and dad, I'm not there. So I didn't do that. But then I wanted to do radio because the first ever independent Asian radio station in the world opened up down the road from me. Yeah, so that was literally walking distance. And we had a family presenter, a veteran presenter on the station. So radio who became a love. I wanted to do radio journalism, so I wanted to do journalism. And that was again a no. I remember having a massive argument at school with Dad on careers evening.
Oh.
And so he wanted me to do law,
Yep.
medicine and law.
I can
And I was like,
understand
no. So he always says, you know, you fooled me. You said you'd consider doing law. I didn't manage when and kept my options open.
kind of. A little bit of law.
Well, I did have law reviews running throughout the ever years I was there. But yeah, it was just, I've always been okay to go against the grain, I guess. But I've always been very respectful about how we do it. And, you know, I've grown up with my grandparents, my mum's side here, a lot of family stuff all the time, all the way around. We did things together a lot.
Do you have quite a large family that?
Yeah, very large. Yeah.
One thing that caught my attention in the bonus episode is that you mentioned people assume they know what catfishing is. Now, obviously, the whole situation that happened with yourself is just one big, insane story of catfishing. How does your experience perhaps challenge common perceptions or misperceptions about catfishing? Like, what do you think a lot of people get wrong? Because I think a lot of people are very quick to make a judgment about these things, and actually we get into it further on. And there was a book that I started to read. The name of it has now slipped my mind, but it's three or four American women who get catfished by this guy.
Yeah, I know which way.
It's like no son.
Yeah, I know which one you mean, but
I'm trying to find the note.
just Google it.
It's
horrible when it's on the tip of your tongue, right?
I can see the book on my desk as well. I was trying to.
Yeah, I don't.
Three of them.
I think I even spoke to some of the ladies since the podcast. We had a Zoom call.
Of the people on that book. Oh wow,
So I've spoken to a lot of people since.
that's insane.
So yeah, we speak to a lot of people. A lot of people that it happens to are actually celebrities and politicians.
I think the other thing is a lot of the like the public's idea of what catfishing is as a result of the TV program.
Yeah,
But it's also like as in like silly kind of like
games.
yeah, or like someone pretending to be like just a beeper.
Culture,
Yeah. Whereas this is far more
sophisticated
and sinister and very calculated, and there's a lot of processing and steps that have to be calculated. Very like you have to. I'm just shocked at the sophistication of it and the balancing of all those different plates, because if one of them slips, the whole thing comes crashing down. So it's a lot of pressure to hold.
That's when it started all going wrong, really. When I started, it was like very quickly after the relationship started, it started going wrong. Then when I started questioning stuff.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started questioning stuff, that's when it became abusive. And then you're sort of put in your place, and that's when I think that abusive period was pretty awful.
A lot of people would say to that, like, why didn't you then at that point think something smells fishy, or why didn't you like take a step back? Like, do you think that's the benefit of hindsight rather than at the time you're kind of in the midst of it and it's a lot harder perhaps to come outside of the box and go, actually, let me see what's actually happening?
Absolutely. Benefit of hindsight, you learn, realize, but when you're in a position where you're scared, walking on eggshells, being controlled, and there's that whole manipulation with the illness is going on, and you've got the family element thrown up over the top, and I'm speaking to lots of people and he's speaking to lots of people. You might think one person's a catfish.
Yeah, you're not going to assume that 60 odd people are all fit.
So you are checking things. So I was trying to cross-reference stuff in an underhanded way, and a couple of things that happened in real life I did confront him with. And I say him because I thought it was a him at the time, because that's what we're talking about. I did check with my cousin at the time, but then everyone's pushing you to one way, and you are being gaslit to the nth degree by many, many, many characters, as well as, somebody you think is your person.
And equally, I think also when people analyze this, look at the story, obviously hindsight's a big factor, but equally we've almost taken a strand of the story rather than, as I was saying, like you have all of these other people, catfishes, that are all manipulating the situation into one particular direction on top of the gaslighting, on top of this and that and the other, and on top of the illness. Like, as in, there's a lot to it rather than I think people, when we try to take it apart, are like, all right, we're just going to look at this tiny bit, forgetting the great context. I think just for the viewers' sake, to fully grasp the conversation, it obviously helps to listen to the Sweet Bobby podcast. I particularly, and I hope you don't mind, I don't recommend the Netflix documentary. I think it's good if you want to waste a couple of hours of your time and eat some popcorn. I don't think it necessarily catches the whole story and the sophistication of what was happening, as well as the Tortoise Media podcast does. And I know it's far longer, but it's definitely worth going and listening to. We're not about to recount all the details, but I think it's worth just kind of briefly sharing. So in 2009, Bobby, or Simon Bogle, befriended yourself. By 2015, the friendship turned romantic, despite Kirat never having met Bobby in person. Simon orchestrated an elaborate deception, creating over 60 fake profiles, mimicking the real Bobby's accent and using medical crises, coercive control, and emotional manipulation to keep yourself trapped. Even when you try to leave, there were various attempts at obviously stopping that.
So can I correct you then?
Yes, please.
So the first approach wasn't actually Bobby. That happened over a year later.
Okay.
So the first approach was Bobby's younger brother.
So she reached out to him.
No, Bobby's younger brother reached out to me as my cousin's boyfriend.
And that wasn't actually him.
No.
That was her again.
Yes.
Okay. Insane. So, because that then didn't work, she then...
Well, no, that was supposedly her boyfriend. So in the podcast,
I see.
yeah, they always speak about his brother.
Yeah.
That same brother was the brother that she impersonated to speak. So I knew he was a real person as well, right? So
Insane. I swear, every time I feel like I've got my head around something, I'm like, all right, there's something else. And I think that is also what is so kind of shocking and sophisticated about it, is that there's just so many layers to this. I think what also Tortoise Media are really good at doing was they brought in lots of experts, and I think that really helped me because I wasn't really listening to it for the kind of the spectacle of it. I was listening to it in terms of analyzing it and trying to figure out A, what's going on, but B, also, why are these people in prison, first of all? In terms of like, why isn't there some type of criminal repercussions for what she has done? According to Professor James Smith, an expert in public protection, coercive control follows a cycle of idealization, dominance, withdrawal, and manipulation, which I think, as we discussed through what happened, it will come apparent. Creating a very imbalanced relationship, and the psychological pattern made it incredibly difficult for yourself to try and break free. I guess one thing also that isn't necessarily communicated too much is the impact of lockdown and how that made it perhaps easier in some ways for this deception to take place. I just want to ask, does it have that much of a role in the story? Like, did lockdown kind of change the nature of it, or would that have just continued anyway?
No, because the story, the confession happened in 2018, so it was before lockdown. But the civil case was taking place over that whole lockdown period. I mean, I tried to start talking to her on the day.
Yeah.
You know, the parents came down, and that's in the podcast as well, if that's explained. And then it just eventually went silent. And the reason for going to a lawyer was, you know, you get that first letter from a lawyer and you think, you get scared, or you think you're getting scared, right? But obviously that didn't happen, because that first letter is about starting mediation. It's not about going to court and filing to court. It's to make you talk.
Yeah.
In a civil case, right? That didn't work, and that went. So again, from that period, I gave her like 18 months to actually have a conversation, right? And then we went into lockdown slowly, and then the whole what's referred to the lockdown period. It all happened in the lockdown period.
I will cut this bit out of the podcast, but I think what's really interesting is that there's a similar situation going on in my family at the moment, where some members of the family are just doing some heinous shit in relation to a family business that we run, and they're refusing to talk again. They're just like, you, which is really, and they've tried to send lawyer letters and bully us and do all sorts of shit, and it's been going on for about 6 months. But it's just uncanny to see, like, as in, I don't know what it is with our community and
You just
that
like,
I've behaved.
dude, it's a dude. It's just use that word.
I'm just being an asshole for no reason. But anyway,
Yeah.
oh, what was that? Was the question asked me something off the?
It was off the back of you dropped out lockdown, we were talking about lockdown, how difficult that made it. So it was the civil proceedings and civil stuff.
That was the question.
Yeah.
Which is like, so far you would say, you know, when they came to the house with the parents, whatever, this is, again, maybe a very me response, but how did you stop yourself from just like launching at her?
She wasn't there when they came home.
Fine, okay.
It was just the parents. But in the moment when she was confessing, I became a wreck. It was just the realization of my worst night, because I've kept on saying, you're making a fool of me. I constantly said at the run up to Bobby, and to even my cousin, that this is a joke. Like, you're making me look like a joke.
Yeah.
And so those arguments, like I said, the abuse.
Yeah.
And then you have a angry response or reactive response. That's reactivity, a reactive response to the abuse. When you sort of lash out. But when I used to lash out, but like, I'm not, you're making a laughing stock of me, of my family. I do all of that. I'd say all of that. So it was that promise of that never going to happen to then it happening. So it wasn't even like it was just the shock of it being her. It's just
actually, none of it was true. It's actually also...
Yeah, my fullest fear of also all the things that I'd said to him about it not happening, and to my cousin to say, why is he behaving like that? Yeah. Because, you should know as a young woman that, you're not like a teenager anymore. You're in 20s and a good job. You know what it's like for us. So I'd have those conversations with her as well. So to actually have your worst fears realized, and worse.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was just that kind of thing, right?
Oh, definitely. Obviously, we've kind of jumped to the end of the story to some degree by talking about kind of the repercussions and kind of the ramifications, which we'll get into a little bit later on as well. At the beginning, as you said, it was first Bobby's cousin,
Bobby's brother
that reached out to you, right? When Bobby reaches out to you, what's your first impression, and why did you trust them?
So when Bobby eventually reached out, it was because of a situation that happened with the brother, and the brother had, what I didn't know then, had disappeared into some kind of witness protection as well. But I thought he died, and I was worried about my cousin. I had, like, when he died, my first, you think, oh, we've been speaking to somebody, and for a bit, even, and you feel sad. Of course you feel sad, right? But then my main concern was my cousin. It was her first boyfriend, and you just think, she's going off to uni soon, and how it's going to impact her. So that was the main concern. I did think, knowing the family, knowing who the family was, that I should pay my respects. But then I was also like, why would they think I'd be talking to him? So,
oh, I see. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, and then I was like, I said to my cousin, maybe I should. So she shared the brother's email address with me, but then I decided not to, because I was just like, oh my goodness, like, you're not that close.
Yes.
So I didn't do that, and I left it, and like couple of months went past, and I got sent a letter in, I think, so August. That happened August, I think, and then October I got sent a letter that apparently her boyfriend had left me, calling me big sister and saying all these wonderful things about me. And I was thinking, I don't think we were that close. Like, like, it is making me sound like I was close to it.
Yeah.
But I didn't think I was. Otherwise I would have done something more, right? Again, I didn't respond to anything. I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize that was it. Still didn't do anything. Because I'm not that way inclined. I just don't do it, right? And then eventually, a couple of weeks later, Bobby then reached out to me to say, thank you for being such a good role model to, like, role model to my younger brother and that kind of thing. And he really looked up to you. And I think I actually said in my response to him, I didn't realize that I meant anything.
Yeah.
He's like,
I think that's cool.
Yeah, but then you're also on the back foot, aren't you? Because, it like, of course, mikita. I'd hear him talking about my mum. Yeah, my mum had passed away just before he had. So I've been really close to my mum, and he So he'd been doing of sorts with me. I heard your mama do your past, and I was thinking, like, he knows a lot about me. So like I was thinking his brother must have talked to him because he knows all of that. Yeah. And you just feel guilty that you didn't do of sorts. So then you're like, I'm really sorry, I should have reached out. And so you're then already starting
in the pocket almost. Yeah. At any point, did you feel, obviously later on in the story, you do try to meet up with him and you do see the real Bobby in Brighton, which I think is an insane twist of fate considering the story, because what is the probability of it's just insane. Anyway, at any point, obviously, in the initial months or years prior to actually seeing him, did you feel, obviously you must have felt compelled to meet him and verify just what's going on?
I didn't.
But again, what stopped that, if that makes sense?
I didn't feel compelled to meet him. I knew who he was, knew who the family was.
And there was nothing at that point?
There was no, like, he was a married man.
Yeah.
I was in a relationship.
Yeah.
There is no, like, compulsion to meet him.
Yeah, there was no need. Okay, fair.
So I just, this is the thing that people don't seem to understand. I mean, it was a nearly 9-year catfish.
Yeah.
But until up to that point where we're in that relationship thing, there was no compulsion to actually...
And that's quite a long way into that night.
Yeah, and by the time... And again, when I saw him in Brighton, it was only a few months after we'd started talking. And you have to remember, Facebook wasn't what it is today.
No.
None of this, it wasn't. It wasn't. And, you had to get on your laptop or your desktop even to get onto Facebook, right? So it wasn't like you were on your phone on an app chatting.
I remember
like that. Yeah, there wasn't even Messenger.
No.
At that point.
No.
They introduced like Facebook chat eventually, and so it wasn't anything like we're talking every day.
And there was nothing suspicious either at this point.
Yeah, because I know who he is.
Yeah.
So even though we hadn't, like, sometimes your extended family, the aunties and uncles, and don't really talk to the kids. It was like that.
Yeah. Because the other family members, you're always giving them a pass. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like, I know who your boy is. I know, like, I do know who she is, kind of thing. And
I actually do know her.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying it.
Yeah. So.
No, fair enough. I think I have to clarify a lot because, again, in the way there is just so much information to take in, and equally, I think there's a lot that happens, and putting the timeline in a succinct order definitely helps them to make sense of that. I think one question as well that I saw a lot of people pose, so I read all the Reddits and I read all of the, I spent like a lot of time researching with this. Like, I listened to the Tortoise Media podcast, I listened to the other few that you sent, that you recommended. I read essentially anything I could find. And on the Reddit, a lot of people are very accusatory in terms of, like, why did you take your story out and what was the motivation behind it? A lot of people try to paint it in quite a self-rewarding way, and kind of like people are almost insinuating as though you're doing it for the money or you're doing it for this or the other. I certainly don't hold those opinions, so please don't shoot the messenger. But I just want to ask, like, what led you, or why did you decide to take your story public? And then secondly, why with, and I'm glad that you did do it with Tortoise Media because they did a brilliant job, but why with them?
I didn't decide to do any of it.
Trish.
You're right. So, basically, if you remember the first episode, and
he gets the
if my source handed me a document.
Yeah.
So that's not a document that I handed over.
Isn't that the civil case?
It was the witness statement.
Yeah.
So that had been leaked, and
okay.
So
and someone had taken it to him.
Yeah, and so it was a case of, they either tell the story and it's a sensational story by itself.
Yeah.
And either they take, because, it's in the public domain. When I say public domain, that doesn't mean it's posted up on the internet.
No.
It's available if you know where to so it's hidden.
Yeah. I was trying to get hold of that same document.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in the public domain in that sense. But it's not like, I look it up and find it.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like a quick, you can download it. No?
Yeah. So they could do what they want with that now.
Yeah.
It's in their hands.
The blasters included you.
Well, I guess the story was in there, right?
Yeah.
So they would have had enough of a story. That that witness statement was like 150 pages. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's a lot.
It's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot in there. So anybody could have condensed that into an article or anything, right? So it was a case of either I do it and make sure they do it respectfully. They have access to everything, so they're not making it up.
Yeah.
There's no assumptions made. And so, I mean, they did everything journalistically. They had full say on it. The only say I had on it was fact-checking it and tone. Because obviously I'm mindful of our community. I don't want our community to be tarnished.
Or ostracized or
Or, yeah, I don't want people to make, whatever's happened, the actions of one person.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect.
It should not reflect the whole of everybody and everything. And I didn't get paid for the podcast, by the way.
No, well, I didn't assume you did because there's not a lot of money in these things.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of people, I think it was just, for me, it was more so the fact of reading those Reddits and those comments and all over social media where people are just quick to throw the blame. And just from doing this, I'm obviously aware that there's very little money in it. Equally, if they were to have paid you, it would have made more economical sense just not to include you, but to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So the assumptions are just quite stupid. But it's always interesting to obviously pose them to yourself to see obviously what the truth is. How did you feel though about the fact that it was leaked? Like when you were kind of first, I don't know, approached with, all right, we've got this information, or this is the kind of the plan, and this is how we've got it. How did you feel at that point?
I was still coming out of the civil case.
Okay.
So I hadn't got my head around, like, if you said to me now, so what date, that should be a really poignant. Yeah. If you said to me right now, what date did the civil case come to a head?
Yeah.
I haven't got a clue because it was all happening at once. Like, it was all really, really messy and my head was in a million places. So I couldn't really, it was that summer.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really say like when it all finished, and I didn't have time to mentally think. Yeah. Everything was just coming at me. So that's what happened. Oh. But the only thing I could do is make sure it was done respectfully.
Fair. I guess then, in hindsight, you probably glad that Tortoise Media got it leaked rather than someone else.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, the other thing was I thought, who knows Tortoise?
I didn't, be honest with you, I'd ever heard of them until this podcast. And I'm sure the 11 million other people who listen to the podcast didn't know Tortoise Media until that point.
So my head was like, it is a podcast. I don't know Tortoise.
Did you expect it to get as big as it did?
No way. Because I was like, there's a million podcasts out there, right? So I was like, there's another one that's going to get lost in the ether.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Ironic.
And after the first episode went out, it just went...
Yeah.
Just after the first episode.
I'm careful with what I engage with in terms of I don't like getting caught up in sensationalism. And when people were kind of retelling it to me, I was kind of like, all right, there sounds like there's more to this than is being told almost. Like this, like as in people are obviously condensing what they hear. And so as then the Netflix documentary came out, I was like, hold on, actually, let me go and let me go and actually find out what's going on. And the sensationalism is there, but I think people are very quick to get lost in that and not then actually pay attention to the facts and the fact that things aren't as sensational as they may seem. So for argument's sake, your friendship starts with Bobby 2008, 2009?
2008, with Bobby, with Bobby's character.
Yeah.
2010, or late 2010.
And then would it be fair to say it comes romantic, however you want to kind of describe that, in 2015?
Yeah.
And ends in 2018.
That's right.
Okay. Do you think, though, the fact that you had that bit from 2010 to 2015 made it then easier to fall into what happened post 2015? Like, as in, if the character of Bobby had reached out to you and, I don't know, try to wax lyrical straight away and try and, like, I don't know, let's go out on a date or something.
Absolutely no chance.
Yeah, that'll...
Absolutely no chance. I think a lot of that kind of stuff was tried, and that when you go back and look at everything, you can see the attempts you can see how attempts have been made. Like, and I'm just very like straight no. I'm one of those, no. And even when I've gone through my messages with people who look at all the evidence and have to go through everything, and there's like other people who obviously try to sometimes approach you online. You say stuff, and I'm just going, sorry, do I know you? Like, that's exactly how I speak to people. Sorry, do I know you? Have we met? Or sorry, I don't talk to
Related or something?
Yeah, I do. I think really, or like, I think one guy was like, I don't talk to guys who big profile, shots where they have the shirts off.
Oh yeah.
There's stuff like that. I've actually said that. I'm quite really blunt. Really, I was always like that. So it takes a lot to get to me.
Yeah.
And a lot for me to say yes. So that whole thing, I think you're talking about people say, that definition of catfishing implies that people are gullible.
Yeah, I just think though that also depends on the sophistication of the catfish. So like again, I think the other problem is and like, I'm also guilty of this, which is when I first heard of catfishing, my ideas are completely related to the MTV program.
That's the thing, though. That's where the term comes from.
Everyone's cultural kind of anchor, as in you ask anyone over a certain age, they will all refer, or under a certain age, they'll all refer to that. And I think that program, the way that's constructed, is very much as though the victim is gullible or really kind of stupid, or whatever the words are. Like, if I'm saying Justin Bieber wants to send you £5 million, like,
really?
Yeah, like that's like, as it is, someone fell for that, I'm kind of like, well, all right. Whereas if it's like your cousin who already knows so much about you, or relative who knows so much about you, who's created a whole cast and array of characters, and then proceeds to lie to you for, I don't know, multiple years, that's far more sophisticated. But I do think we had, like, that's also why I was wanted to do podcasts, which is, in this case, the sophistication outweighs any form of being gullible. Like, as in, it's not like, oh, here's, I don't know, like, if you jump, I'll give you a £5 note. It's kind of like years. Like, as in, we've just spoken about how from 2010 to 2015, there's a friendship. So that in itself is breaking down those barriers that you may have had up otherwise. And I guess beyond Bobby's character, friends, family, and even medical experts that reinforced the lie of his death, and then obviously the witness protection and medical crises, what convinced you that, I think looking in hindsight, you take all of that and people are like, well, at one point, did you not think this has to be a lie? Like, as in, and how did you manage, like, how did you, I don't know, try to verify those instances?
That's fine. I had the same questions that people have, right? So when I was going through that, when we were going through it, I had exactly those same questions. I'm just as, but again, the other thing I'm not is I don't insert myself into people's lives. I'm not somebody who will be like, oh, I want to find out. A lot of people, people like gossip. All the trolls online, they're the people that love gossip, right? Because they want to.
They want to go make something of their lives.
Yeah. So I'm like I said earlier, I'm an active person. I've got a busy life. I had a partner. I was studying, even though I was working. I was doing further study. I was really busy. My little brother was quite young, and I was doing all his school stuff. So I was doing all his, open evenings, taking him to school. That would be me, right? Yeah. So I was already sort of being like second mum, as at the same time as working, studying, everything.
Your own stuff, yeah.
And as a radio presenter and working the media side, as well as doing my work, I was also doing that whole social thing. As you probably heard on the Native Immigrant podcast. But so I had a busy life, and the internet and social media is something that's not high on my priorities. It's not something I've given too much attention to. I've not, even now after everything, I've not opened up a public profile for anything. I've stayed private, and I stand by that.
Yeah. I did get to, well, I didn't get to you, but a mutual friend reached out and
Yeah. Touch part, right?
Yeah.
So, and so he was just, I'm just not that way inclined. So when all that craziness was going on, so like Bobby died, okay, fine. I was put in a group chat with 40 people in it. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure why I'm in this. Even when, again, he'd already got divorced and remarried as well. And I'd broken up from one relationship and gone back to another one like that.
Yeah.
So it was like we both had separate lives. we lived our separate lives.
So it's actually the retelling of the story makes it as though this is all-consuming, whereas actually you're saying you're doing, like, you're just getting on with your day-to-day business, and this is just going on in the background. Like this is just kind of like information that you're getting, and you're like, all right, cool. It's not an all-consuming situation where you're like, oh God, I need to go and find out. Figure it out.
I'm not going to go and save the day for him. He's got a wife, he's got a family, he's got whatever goes on, whatever weirdness is going on, that's for them to do. And, when he came back, and apparently I was like, obviously, it's like, what? Even now when I remember that moment, because when I got the phone call from my cousin to say he's alive, because his wife had messaged me to say, my cousin's going to call me. Yeah. She knows what's happened. And when she called me, and I was, remember it vividly, because how often do you get calls like that, right? So, and I went out into the little piazza that we had, and I was on the phone, and I just remember coming back into the office, because obviously this is how you know I'm not that close, because I used to tell everybody in the office, the solver, of what was going on all the time, and it's like, because I'm like, how can somebody be that unlucky?
Yeah.
Can you imagine this has happened? And we talk in the office about it. It was like,
and what would it
was like a little soap opera.
How would your colleagues then say it?
We'd all just be like, God, that's crazy. It's just we just all have that kind of. But I walked back in and just went, it's alive, and it was just, I was like hysterically I was trying to work, and I just stop and I just laugh, and it's just
like, how does this make any sense?
Yeah, because you're like, what, and when my colleague across the desk from me, she's just like,
you are.
Because they were just as I just said. I told them, do you remember you died? Do you remember you died a few months ago?
And now you're back.
Yeah.
Resurrected.
So it was really kind of surreal, funny, but again, okay, fine, he's back. Happy families, go off and do it now, right?
Yeah.
So even after that, I didn't speak to him for a couple of months, but his wife was talking to my cousin was talking to me about what was going on, and I think his wife made him message me to say thank you for being so good to her while he was gone. And just it's okay.
Was there anything? So this is more so a question of curiosity. So I work in social media partly as my 9 to 5, and one thing that we've kind of had to specialize in is cybersecurity and all sorts of other stuff. Was there anything forensically about the messages? Sometimes you can read a message from someone and you can tell it's not written by them because they will write or spell, or they will do certain kind of
nuances.
Yeah, they'll get out of the way. Like, for argument's sake, I know if my older brother's gonna message me, he'll often it will be like he's writing proper English. It'll be perfect English with punctuation in the right places. And so I know if his daughters are texting me, I can tell straight away off his phone because they don't write in the same way.
Okay, so I'm as forensic as you. So I've read all their Agatha Christie, I've read all her novels, Mary Higgins Clark. Oh yeah, I watch, and again I used to watch CSI, and I used to behind the scenes CSI. So Bobby made me stop watching that.
Okay.
And one thing that since I've been little is that my dad used to always I used to be called quite inquisitive.
Yes.
That was the first long word I learned how to spell because of it. And so I've got a very inquiring mind in that sense. So I totally I totally would have picked something like that up. And occasionally when there was they dropped the ball, I picked something like that up. So I was picking up lots and lots of little detail because of how stuff works, but they all had very distinct characters.
So this is actually real. This isn't sophistication just in terms of creating the people. There's also sophistication into giving them individual mannerisms.
Oh yeah,
individual kind of personalities.
They all had their own personalities. I mean, even Bobby and one particular cousin, we were in a group, 3 of us, and them two would talk in Swahili, and my Swahili is pretty awful. And I can sometimes, just you two just talk, it's okay. It's just yeah, whatever. You guys just take the mick out of me, do whatever you want. It's all right. I'm used to it. My cousin Kenya do it to me as well. Right? It's okay. So I'm quite good at laughing at myself. So I don't take myself too seriously. And so I'd be like, yeah, you two carry on, say what you want in the group, and they'd be chatting in Swahili, and I'd be like, okay. you know. And again, you know, he was talking to my mum in Swahili as well. So
Every time I feel like I've got my head around it, I'm like, okay, this is like another level. So a couple of things when I was going through the podcast that I was literally, so my local kind of studies in the loft and it's fairly soundproof. So I was literally shouting at the screen going, why did, like, how, like, as in genuinely, like, what is going on? So there's one point where I may be wrong, but there's like a numerous hour Skype call with Bobby. And from what I can remember from the podcast, he doesn't turn his camera on and his voice is very altered.
yeah.
However that is described. Whether the person on the other end of the phone is using something to alter their voice or not, who knows? But during that, like, I was almost like, isn't that too bizarre to believe? Like, isn't that too... Like, how do you explain that away? Like, how did they explain that away, if that makes sense? Like, as in, I would have been so...
It was the stroke. So that's the reason why the altered voice, because I knew what he sounded like. Because even in the run-up to, you remember, I was sent videos, of course, of them. So I know what he sounds like. I spoke to him in Brighton.
Yeah.
I know what he sounds like. So it wasn't like a case of he sounds different to how he would, so I could be suspicious. He was going to sound different because he'd lost his voice during the stroke. So he had to have speech therapy, voice therapy.
So there was already a reason, place for the voice being different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously the consultant was backing that up as well.
What?
And so there's that whole thing. And so so, you know, what am I supposed to say? No. What do you say to somebody who's unwell? That can't be. No.
It's only in hindsight then did you find out that that wasn't the case.
It was only in hindsight that I suddenly thought, you know, it was afterwards, because I remember the situation when my partner had said, like, he'd been having phone calls and he described the voice as being bassy or like,
yeah.
And I was like, oh, and he'd assumed it was somebody else that was calling him. And I was like, no, it couldn't be that person. And then it was a few days after the confession that my mind suddenly went, oh my gosh, those calls and the description of the voice and
Bunches.
I was just like, ow. And yeah, you just kind of think that. But yeah, I just, you know, you're going to question yourself. You got somebody who's had a stroke in whatever, and what you're going to say, this isn't you.
Yeah. Why would you not believe that is the case?
Especially when you got other people, whatever, and even the whole, and other people it wasn't just me talking to him at that point. So I think his cousin and obviously the consultant was talking. There was that 2 or 3 of us at that point were still talking to him. And they were like shared group conversations. So everyone was having the same information. It wasn't just me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just like, what do you do with somebody who's that unwell?
True.
It's horrible, isn't it? Accusing somebody who's that sick of being...
Well, at that point, you're none the wiser, especially with the reasoning and the context that would have been created. One thing then is that, was there anyone, but kind of a mutual friend of the Bobby character and real Bobby who became suspicious, or was there a kind of an active attempt at keeping that separate? Because I can understand, like yourself, the array and cast of characters that were created in order to keep you from, I don't know, becoming more aware of actually the truth. In hindsight, you can see how like the sophistication and the abuse enables that. But considering there is so many people involved, was there anyone who was like, hold on, I know that, like, I know Bobby, if that makes sense. Like, I know the real Bobby, and this, like, he's not dead, or whatever it is, or he's not had a stroke, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, in the early days when we were just friends, I'd mentioned, like, I remember at one of my cousin's weddings, we were just sitting around afterwards, like, in between, as you do when you've got nothing going on. And I just mentioned in the family, because his family's well known, that so-and-so in their family isn't something had happened. And they're like, well, we would have known. I'm sure I would have known. And I'm like, well, this is his son that said it, you know? So, like, I've firsthand, like, you can't argue with that, can you? And they're like, maybe not. Yeah, like that whole creating doubt.
Yeah.
I did. So my dad spent a lot of time in Kenya at that time. And like my dad spent a lot of time with Bobby's family, as well. And that whole thing about not wanting to tell my dad, or wanting to tell my dad himself. So even my mum wasn't allowed to say, it was supposed to be a surprise for my dad because there was going to be awkwardness because of the whole ex-wife situation, and his family wanting him to get back together with her. So he was like, you need to let me tell my family, let me deal with my family, and then I will tell your dad. So it was like, you know how we do in a family, that how do you bring up this relationship, which might be a bit awkward. And he was like,
This is where I'll deal with it.
And, you know, and it was that kind of, I'll deal with it. It's not going to be in your head to say anything. And, you know, just let whatever goes, not in, just don't let your dad know. Which I nearly did, though, at one point. When my dad just got stuck on the him being divorced situation. And then I just didn't take it any further.
You're like, yep, I'll rewind and out of this. See that? Yeah, fair enough.
So, but it was just that whole deliberately trying to keep me away from that. So I'd bump into his family, and I'd generally ask how they are, talk to them, but obviously I wouldn't say that I knew about what was going on.
Yeah.
But I did at one point do that, and because we're so connected, I did at one point do that, and what I found out was quite horrible, and I confronted him with it immediately. So in front of them, and again, they heard the voice, and they didn't question it.
Oh, wow.
So when their own people who've been with him a few months before have questioned it,
yeah.
And even when I shared my doubts with what was going on, and like they were like, yeah, it's totally possible that him and his wife aren't together anymore. It could be just if you're telling it like this and what you've showed us, and you've called him in front of us, it was just like, you know, sometimes in families in our community we hide things, don't we? And you just, it is just the way. It's sad.
Yeah.
And that's what it was felt. And there was that kind of a fear of what the truth is and have we unraveled something, or, you know, like.
And should we stop kind of digging and going further for us? Like,
well, it was more as in like they were worried on their side, as in had they found out something about the family, and because it was like a female and it was her in-law side, it was like, oh, we don't want to
rock the boat. We don't want to just
we don't want to be the ones that
house.
Yeah, we don't want to be the ones to rock that boat. So it was one of those situations. But again, I was like, that things I was like uncovering lies basically.
No, I see
but they were kind of lies. It was just all different layers of stuff going on,
like half truths with some truth and a little bit of a lie, and then you actually can't figure out.
No one could figure out.
Yeah, there's some truth in all of it, but not completely.
It's all that kind of stuff going on, and everyone's backs up, right?
Yeah. And no one also wants to be the bad guy in terms of like rocking the vote or kind of exposing.
It's like, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that
That's how some people see me.
You are the. Like, and I don't mean this with any offense or anything, but you were certainly the victim in this situation. And I think the sophistication, I think the more that I'm referring to, the more sophisticated that I've realized the whole thing is. And I think even just on even prior to the conversation, if you just boil down the Tortoise Media podcast into its bare facts, it's really quite insane how sophisticated it is. It's almost like an evil genius level of sophistication, because like I get bored giving 2 or 3 people personalities and characters, but there's like a cast of 60, like as in even just like for argument's sake, the question about his voice, that's already been answered by the fact that they're creating an excuse with the stroke. Like as in the foresight with the story is insane. Like to be able to plot and be like, all right, if I say this at this point, then later on when I do this, I've got an excuse. One thing though in episode 3 that because I was listening to it on my AirPod and I literally turned around and I rewound it because I was like, did she just say that? Which is, you tell Bobby in episode 3, character Bobby, that you'd walk away from everything, drop your keys in a gutter and see what happens. Well, what is going through your head at this point? And why did you feel like that rather than like, no, I'm going to go and just tell, I don't know, somebody, like this, I don't know, someone who you confide in, like if I'm going to say, I don't know, even a sibling or a parent or whoever, but what was going on in that little frame of time?
So that was the coercive and controlling behavior kicked in like a couple of years before that now. So I am at my wit's end.
Yeah.
I've made Bobby come from New York to the UK. Bobby's now in London. I'd said to Bobby, you do not tell my mum you're here until you're ready to see her.
Yeah.
What did Bobby do?
Tell you what.
Yeah. So now my mum's like, oh, you're going to go and see Bobby, all that excitement. My brother...
And then he's refusing to meet you.
And he's so refusing to meet me, but I can't then take... He knows he's put me in a position where... And again, I'm saying it as he, because I thought...
Yeah, no, completely.
No, 'cause some people actually be like, well, she talks about him like he's real. And I'm like, well, in order for you to understand...
Yeah, if I...
Like, all the different characters, it's like, I still think I'm at that point talking to him.
No.
Yeah, so it was like he had then put me in this position, and I was conscious of it. I was conscious of by that time I'm conscious of his games.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I am working, because I'm like, he has to come here and face, even if this isn't going to happen, he has to face me, and he has to face my mom, at least.
Yeah.
And he has to do that. Just to, so...
Yeah.
he's been talking about it. Yeah, and so he's come, and then he won't meet me, and so he knows exactly what's going to happen, because he's having conversations with my mom about me coming to see him. So I'm now going there, and no one's seeing me, and I'm just sitting in the car or walking around every other day. So I wasn't going every day. And my mom would be upset. Everyone started asking questions. I think me and my brother, at one point, he'd asked me to shop for... So he was staying in a hotel initially until his house got cleaned up, and at one point he asked me to shop for cleaning stuff for his house. So I remember me and my brother had gone and bought all his cleaning stuff for the house, and it was Easter. Thought, let's buy him an Easter egg now. Bought the Easter egg as well, and so I had all that cleaning stuff, and I'd never handed it over because he wouldn't
Physically.
Yeah. So I think this would have been quite far into it, and I was quite distressed, and I was like, I needed the bathroom. I'd been sitting outside in the car. I couldn't work out which house it was. He could say he would say he could see me in the car, and I couldn't work out which house it was, because every house, the address that I had, didn't seem to exist.
Oh, I see what you mean. So putting Google Maps don't take you like just a spot. Yeah.
Yeah, but then it seemed to be the spot from all the descriptions and everything. And then I'd stop people in the street, like whether he was watching me, I'd stop people in the street, and they'd be like, "Oh, it'd be this house, it'd be this house." Oh, so they're all like, "Yeah, it's just here somewhere."
So we kind of added up.
So, but again, I was sitting there, I'm like, I can't see which house. He was like, just there, it's that house there. And I was looking up at the houses, but where's he looking at me from? Like that whole scenario. And I needed the bathroom once. I remember I was so bursting, had to go. I'd end up walking all of South Kensington.
Oh my!
I'd end up going to Sainsbury's, end up like I'd waste my hours away, just like wandering around. Walk up to Natural History Museum. I'd
go past Harrods.
Yeah, I'd just do all of that whole thing and then just waste my time away. And one time I'm like, you need to see me. Like, you need to see me now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, fine. I'm so fed up of it. And it must have been like kind of 4 or 5 weeks of him being in London, or 6 weeks of him being in London and not seeing me yet. And I was like, that's it. And I left my car there, and I said, I'm walking. It was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning or something stupid like that. And I just thought, I'm going to walk, and if something happens to me, I'm going to walk aimlessly. I'm going to drop. I was literally threatened him with dropping my keys, and as you can explain to my mum what happened to me. I was like, it was like trying to get him to...
Yeah, it was forcing him into something.
Forcing into something, right? It's just like... And I was so distressed.
So that's the, like your wit's end in terms of you tried for so long to try to see him, and it's just not work.
I was a bag of bones. I was being played like from my family. They were like, no, what's happening? I've been
Sure. Sorry, yeah.
And I was just not like I had been like since July 2016 when the trust went.
Yeah.
From that period onwards, I was just not myself anymore. Totally not myself anymore. And my Naniji passing away, in 2017, just took me down further. And yeah, so I just wasn't me.
Nice. And I'm hoping things have got better for you since.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No.
Back to myself. But
I was going to say, because you walked in with such energy and then some kind of like radiance. I was like, yeah, cool.
I'm good. I mean, that's the thing. People expect me to be like crying and like, oh no, they do. They expect me to be like some forlorn victim. Like, do you know that whole? It's like I can't have been a victim because I'm smiling, because I'm happy, because I'm getting on with my life. Everything's not perfect, but
No, we both did. Yeah. It's always good, no matter what. No matter. One, I think one thing that we've definitely discussed is how sophisticated the whole catfishing, this whole, I don't even know the word is, saga,
I
story.
called it I called it online entrapment.
It is an entrapment, yeah, completely. And the sophistication is just insane. And I think one thing that the podcast is good at was the example of the bathing clothes and how she reverse engineers essentially getting you to pick the right clothes that she already has a picture of Bobby's kid in, and that the depth of the deception, but also the lack of a moral compass to use someone's kids in this type of thing as well is a bit just
Sick.
Yeah, sick, twisted.
I just find it sick. That's how I found it.
There's definitely something wrong with the perpetrator of this whole incident. Like, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all of them combined, I have no idea. But like a normal person doesn't do any of this. Looking back, is there anything that still to this day shocks you at the length that the perpetrator of all of this went to in order to actually deceive you? So I think there's one bit where you're on the phone to Bobby in an airport, and there's like the sounds of the airport going off in the background. When I was listening to it, I was like, she's just put on a YouTube video.
I think she went to the airport. We don't go.
Which is even more insane of the...
We're not that far from the airport where we are, so...
And even that, like, as in having the want and the energy to be like, oh, I'm going to get in my car and drive to the airport just in order to have this conversation to try and fool this person and stuff. Like, I just think...
Also the sophistication of knowing, like, South Kent, knowing what, like, when Bobby was in the house, telling me, like, go to this place, go to this restaurant's really good, this dessert, get some food from there if you want, I'm not coming out. But telling me where to go, obviously knew, had researched the whole area. That kind of, all that kind of stuff. But, I working in radio and media and sound as well. So it was, I think finally what pushed me over the edge was not, like, I'd been in that area now for a few years. And when it didn't sound like Bobby was in that area was when was when it really, like, something's all right. Because I know what the area sounds like. But so when it comes to things like sound detail, because I was so suspicious from 2016 onwards after my trust broke, there was one night, for example, where she must have called out in her sleep or something. And I heard something fall, and there was like a call out of something. And obviously I'm on the other end of the phone.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I woke Bobby up. And I said, what was that? And I said, I heard, like, yeah. And I heard something fall, and I heard a woman. I said, it sounded like a bucket or something like that falling over. And I remember saying that. And again, this is what coercive and controlling behavior is, and where you gaslit to the point where, one, it was like flying into rage at me for accusing him of something. Yeah. And I said, oh, it would be weird if you're sleeping with me. I'm not saying it would be weird if you were sleeping with me and somebody called her, but I'm like, what happened? Like, I know I didn't not hear it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Don't make me think that I've, like, done it out myself when I know what happened, yeah.
So it was that kind of little things like that, but every tiny little thing, if I accused him or asked him something, again, the rage.
Will keep my head.
Yeah, and there was a lot of raging at me in the last 2 years, and which kept me scared. And lots of threatening. And it wouldn't always come from Bobby. Sometimes it would come from Bobby's family. And then he would be the savior. Yeah. Then you're kind of going, oh, he's still like, you're like, he's protecting me still over, he's choosing me over all of them. It was that kind of trauma bonding or whatever they call it now. All these terms didn't exist when all this started. Even like the MTV Catfish program didn't come out till 2012. Yeah. So, we didn't know about any of this.
Yeah. Obviously, we've discussed this already, but I think it goes without saying that gullibility isn't a factor in this. And I think what was interesting is that the coercion exploits trust and vulnerability. So your trust in his family members or in the community, or I don't know, the vulnerability of knowing, like within our culture, you wouldn't necessarily go and share what's happening in someone else's household with, say, the wider community or whatever. And that's also seen in the book that we were trying to reference earlier, which I figured out what it's called, which is There Is No Ethan, where it gets it. Highly educated individuals are deceived. I think there's 3 or 4 women. I got through like a third of the book again to try and understand more about this type of weird behavior. Con artists like Simundo target intellect and manipulate trust, cultural expectations, and emotional struggles to maintain control. Now, there are a lot of people who find this story unbelievable and insist a rational person would have called their bluff. And I think from having the last hour and a half or hour or so that we've been discussing, you're extremely rational, and at a number of times you did question things, but the sophistication of the deception around you almost allows you not to come out of it. It's almost like that net is so big that even when you go over here to try and question something, like for instance, when you're saying you rang Bobby and his family there are there, and they don't question the voice, that for me would have been
Okay.
yeah, like that's just silly, like as in that's approved. So what would you say to those people who are like, a normal person or a rational person would have seen this? Is it the fact that we're looking with hindsight and being like, oh, it's obvious? Or is it just the fact that people like to troll, like you discussed at the beginning?
I think you're talking about a very long period of time.
Yeah.
And people forget that because you're hearing it in a short space.
Yes.
The amount that there's only like the podcast uses a handful of examples.
Yeah.
You could remember it was daily, but towards the end, this was daily. You could remember things like if you're having a phone call with somebody and somebody else calls you, you don't assume that's one person, but yes, it's 2 people, right? So you've got things like that happening all the time. You've spoken to more than one person. People are speaking. So again, people that know people. So I mean, I was with the Hen Weekend girls a few weeks ago, just like after the documentary came out. And I didn't think so many of them would have remembered me going across. But they were like, no, we remember. And I'm always like, okay. Because it was on when we were finishing the night and we were trying to leave. So, and, you know, a lot of them were like, yeah, it wasn't a case of like happy, like you should have asked him this and you should have. It was just like you bumped into somebody and like, oh my God, what's he doing?
Yeah.
He walked across, he didn't speak, and I thought, oh, he's a bit drunk. He's got divorce things going on.
He's busy with other stuff.
And he's with his mate and it's the end of the night and I just don't want to, you don't want to embarrass somebody or you don't want to, and I never raised it again.
Let's on someone's toes or whatever, yeah.
But I never brought it up either because I was like, you just don't, our conversation was so respectful that you don't want to be like, I saw you in the club. It wasn't that kind of, we didn't even have that nudge wink to that.
I saw you last weekend, didn't it?
Yeah. Because if he was keeping up a respectable facade, then I didn't want to break that facade. And it was just, and again, like I said, it didn't bother me. Like, he's doing his thing. It's all right. I'm not somebody that's like, oh my God, I didn't speak to him and I did that. Yeah. And I'm not that person.
This may be more of a direct personal question, but do you think that if you were more unbothered about the community or perhaps unbothered about, like if I even say Bobby's facade in that instance, would you have been able to perhaps nick this in the bud sooner than the way it unraveled?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the hard bit, and no, there's no disrespect to our community, but we do have. I love everything I do. Like, there's growing up in it, and I promote it, and I do everything, for our com. And there's bad things about every com.
Yeah.
And it's not just our com. We're talking about not just the Sikh or Punjabi culture. We're talking about South Asian culture, and since the podcast, it's not just the South Asian culture, Philippine culture. There's the black culture. There's certain I get messages
on white culture,
any minority group, right, who has to protect themselves from wider society in this country. I can't speak for other countries because I'm but if you're a minority group, you have to protect your culture, your community from the judgment of wider society. Because if one of you is like that, they automatically tarnish you like that, right? So it's something that we all put, all these communities, we put that on ourselves. And so we're scared to call out the bad stuff. But I just think there's nothing wrong with calling out the bad stuff within your, if you're doing it rather than letting somebody else do it, then you're saying, look, we are responsible. We're a responsible community.
It was on ourselves. We hold each other to
account.
Yeah.
And we don't do that.
No.
And
But as a result, she's able to then
carry
manipulate and take advantage of that because she knows that's a vulnerable, but she knows that's almost part of the societal fabric. Like she's aware that you will work in certain ways, obviously, as an influence of that.
And that's also the reason why I had to do the civil case, because I felt that she, over the 9 years, she had accumulated too much information on me, my family, my friends, because the stuff that we would find out from Bobby would be like, how does she know that person? Because even I don't know that person. And stuff about my extended family. And it was just like, not even extended family, with my dad's friends' extended family, with all Kenyan community. It's like, you're like, wow.
Like, what leaf haven't you turned over at this point?
It was like stuff like news about people passing away or things happening. And I'd be like phoning people going, did you know this yet? Because you should know it first.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't know it yet. And then the phone call gets someone on the phone, like, okay, put the phone down. We're not going to say that you told us. We're going to tell them that they told us. You know, that whole kind of thing. And it's like, how the hell did... And knowing that she's not Bobby, and Bobby had explained his connections, apparently. So you think, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then learning that she wasn't Bobby and that she got that information
Through some other means. Yeah.
from some other means. For me, it's like, how? Like, I still don't know how.
It's
And it's
disingenuous and evil.
But it's scary, though.
It's sinister, yeah.
It's really scary. And so when everything happened, they were always telling me to move on and nothing was happening. The police case was just being that stalemate. I think there was a period of fear from their side because her parents were at my house when I got the message about going to the police station. And I think once they realized nothing was happening, everything became like normal. So I felt intimidated because I was like, if I try to pull this out, she's going to throw something personal.
Family or something.
And again, you know, like in our community, anything can be blown out of proportion.
And for that, you can make up some rumor or some BS and that gets stuck as well. So
exactly. And that's not just, I mean, it's in wider society, but it's magnified in small communities. And it's just that horrible feeling of creating reasonable doubt, isn't it? It's that creating doubt or a cloud around somebody. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for anybody around me. And I just thought, it's not on. No, I'm not living the rest of my life in fear. I'm not going to stop going out or
live my own life.
But I didn't feel like I could. Because the other thing was like, I'm going for job interviews. I got a contract quite quickly. I was lucky. But afterwards, you know, like thinking, how do I explain X, Y, Z? How do I explain this on my CV? How do I, there
are real life implications to this that you have to tackle. Yeah.
Every door, like I got from August to December after the confession. In that first few months, I was just so happy to have my freedom back.
Yeah.
Even after the confession, in that moment of the confession, I don't think people understand. Like anyone who's been in a coercive and controlling relationship will understand this. That weight that's lifted off your shoulder, that you can get into your car or you can pick up the phone and speak to whoever you want without worrying. You can get in your car and go somewhere without worrying. That I can talk to my mum openly. I can talk to my brothers openly. I can just that weight of having that lifted. I lived in a house with my family and I couldn't speak to them. It was so pressurized because it would be like he would message them before I could get to them. And I'd get told of like, why are you being difficult with them?
Oh, God.
He's just saying, so I was painted in a bad light.
From the get-go. Yeah.
From not having enough patience with him, for not having... Mom would be like, this is...
You're like, what could like, as in, you're always like, what am I doing that is wrong? Because you're obviously not wanting to do that and you aren't doing that. But obviously the manipulation is what is creating that doubt and that
And it's user
trapment
people around me.
that you love and actually genuinely care for and respect. Yeah.
So it was not fair on anybody. And I know that my mom feels it. She's in the documentary, but my dad speaks on the podcast as well. And it's hard for everybody. It's hard for everybody, and it just wasn't fair. And we didn't know so much. We learned so much more after the podcast came out. So yeah.
So just kind of looking at the why behind all of this. Many assume Syngman's actions were driven by love, narcissism, or a need for power. I personally also think that there's some level of jealousy or something involved in this, because I just can't. That's an assumption. I just don't understand why otherwise you would go to such depravity and depths to construct something like this, and also spend so long. I may be thinking of 6 weeks, 6 months, but multiple years is just almost unfathomable. I know in the bonus episode of the Four Force Media podcast where they do like a Q&A session, you say that I try not to dwell on the why as it doesn't change what she did. And that's obviously completely true.
Yeah.
While that's understandable, don't you think kind of exploring those motives provide a deeper insight into just what the hell is going on? Or do you avoid it in order to avoid those endless what ifs, and you're like, well, what about this and what about that? And then actually getting lost in that kind of cycle of what was going on. And ultimately, how do you round that circle? Like, how do you square that circle? Which is like, how do you conclude when you think about why, are you just like, it's like a closed door, or do you have some type of conclusion or paragraph where you're like, actually, I kind of have a feeling it happened for X, Y, and Z reason?
So initially, in
the
podcast, I'd believed at that point, that it was a first love gone wrong. So even up to that point, it was like first love gone wrong. She probably fancied or dated the brother, and it had gone wrong, and then she started impersonating him to make herself feel good.
Yeah.
And I just think it snowballed. It snowballed from there.
Yeah.
That's what I thought until Bobby spoke on the podcast.
Okay.
And when you hear him say, my brother went out with her, but then the dates don't match with what I thought had happened.
Fine.
And, you hear that she'd done the same to him using some of the same characters. And we now know she's done it to at least one other person during the same time period. And so that whole thing. So again, I didn't know that up until the podcast came out. I didn't know that. In my head, it had always been like, that was the first love gone wrong, and it spiraled out of control. And I don't know why it got to the level that it did.
Yeah.
That's what was in my head. Since then, is now I know it's not that.
Oh, fine. So you know what it isn't, but you're almost.
But in my head, it'd always been that.
Yeah.
Like a first love gone wrong. She was a young girl, and how some.
Is that also?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's like that sounds painful. That sounds painful.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely. Do you also think though that looking at that, like I said, do you also think that there's almost a comfort in it being? I know it's not, but if you like, as you're saying, you thought it was that up until you came across more facts, but is it also there's almost a comfort in it being that rather than it being perhaps something more sinister, if that makes sense? Because like you're almost like, actually it could just be this, which perhaps understandable, rather than it being like, well, perhaps the perpetrator of all of this is actually just someone who's really twisted and vindictive.
I don't know. I thought that was I'm a very rational person, which is why it took such a long time to do stuff. But I just thought that was a very rational explanation. I didn't realize she hadn't dated him, because from my interactions with her around her friends, they all seemed to know who he was.
Oh, I see.
Right? Her school friends.
Yeah.
And given, I had somebody out of my family that was in a class as well. Like, everybody seemed to know that he existed.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't, so they've all been had too, but you do hear in the podcast that there was something that happened in school as well. But, you know, the fact that they all thought...
Oh, yeah, she got caught. Yeah.
But the fact that they all seemed to know who he was...
Always. Ouch.
It's just sort of like, well, they all know. So it was a school thing then.
Yeah.
And so you kind of think that.
Do you think people would take the whole story more seriously? Is maybe not the right word, but I can't think of a better word at the moment. But do you think the whole kind of view of this would have changed if the perpetrator was a male?
Oh, I think undoubtedly, male or a different community. I think
That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
male or a different community, male easily. Even the police had said that to me when I'd gone to the police.
Oh wow.
So the fact that it was, you know, younger cousin female, that, you know, maybe
The fact it's a family relationship probably doesn't help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's but then if it had been a male in a family relationship, they'd still take that seriously.
Mad.
But if it wasn't, yeah.
So
So, you know, so that whole thing, and, you know, and one of the police officers said it to me. She was just somebody on duty, and she just said it as a throwaway comment. And I was waiting to see, get some advice at the police one-stop shop, which has happened at a local council with a local MP and some solicitors and stuff. So I was waiting for advice. I had already been to the police station, and she just said it to me. And they given me extra time to explain everything. They're like, whoa, and did not share something. If it was a man, you don't know his trouble. She uses. Because they take it more seriously. And I was just like, she's telling the truth there.
yeah, that's just the situation of the law.
She's just telling the truth. So you can't knock her for saying that.
No.
But
They're the facts.
and again, but I do believe in our community, had it been somebody with a different faith,
Yeah.
even if it had been somebody of a different faith,
I think if it had been someone of a different faith, I feel like our community would have taken our community
would have
taken
been up in arms.
Yeah.
It would have been
Yeah.
absolutely up in arms.
Yeah.
And that's what I find really sad, because our guru didn't teach us that.
No.
It was about standing up for the truth. And I've, you know, I don't ever claim to be the best sick in the world, but at the same time, I do try my hardest
Yeah.
to live by the right principles. Like, we're on our path, we're all on our journeys, and I do try my hardest, and I try to be as principled as I can and as honest with myself as I can. And I've, you know, it's like sometimes you have to lose people along the way, and it's okay.
To defend.
And that's fine. So
No.
I just, I find that hard. I find that hard to. It's not that people haven't supported me, so I'm not going to say that. There are people in the community really strongly but they don't openly do it.
No, of course.
Right? But there's so many in our communities who have
Secret group, then they do it in the background and they don't praise.
It's not even about praise, though. It's about not letting the world. If you're people who are of a certain standing in our community, you have some kind of power.
Yes.
If people look up to you, you have some kind of a say. So they're supporting me, it's great. But to say something or be like, no, we need to deal with these things in our community. And that's because I would have done it. I would have dealt with it in our community had they wanted to. But I just, it's just that kind of job thing that everyone does. But it's kind of been surprising who has come forward. And this is only that. And I was worried about family, but it's been, I've said so many times, the silence is really loud from the places that you expected it.
Yeah.
But where I'm getting support from is just absolutely, I'm so grateful for.
Well,
I'm just like.
In the bit of the podcast where it says that you meet Hamrit from, is it the Punjab
restaurant? Yeah.
I was like almost cheering whilst I was listening. I was like, yes, these are like, and I also think it's interesting that only when men get involved in your story does then your story seem to be taken seriously. I'm not taking anything away from Todos Media or from Amrik, because they have both done a brilliant job.
They know how I feel
in working.
They know how I feel about this. They all understand how I feel, because it's like I'm articulate.
Yeah.
And I'm able to voice. When I went to the police station, I've been traumatized, but I knew exactly, as I said, what's about me. I knew I could explain, I could show, but until somebody went with me every time, I was never taken seriously.
But that says more about the police than anything, though.
Well, police, anybody though. Like, even for me, like, the whole reason I did the civil case was, one, to get that fear thing away from me. But the other reason was that I had something solid on paper that had gone through a system,
Yeah.
a process.
A legal system of some sort.
Yeah. To say, here this is, and don't argue with this right now. And all these people who are trolling me right now, it's like, well, I have something.
Yeah.
It's a story. Yeah, it's
Really like
it has been like, something has happened for it to get to this point. But the fact that publicity, I'm like the most private person. So for anyone to say, I've done radio for 20 years, I've never posted a picture of like me and my well-known friends. Even now, I haven't forced anybody to post anything about me because they've got a following.
Well, it's very good.
I'm not about that. I don't want to impose on anybody else's life yet. I'm not that person that's going to say, do this for me. And I never have been. I might do it for other people. But that's just me. I don't expect anyone to I've not gone around begging people to do stuff for me.
No, of course.
And I'm like, the trolls will troll.
Yeah.
Let them have their moment.
Even when you're stoned with truth, yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
I always take, whoops. I always take comfort from our gurus.
Yeah.
And I always try to find like parallels in Asakiya and think, okay, if they could, I can. They do so much more. I could do this little thing, And if for me, the ultimate thing is after the podcast, the response was so good. As in, I was so grateful to have a voice after that. And even if it has been men that spoke, that they've also raised that point that it has.
Yeah, they're not blind to it either.
They're not blind to it. They are very aware of the unfair kind of.
But how long you get through that though?
Not be ungrateful.
Yeah, no, of course.
At all.
No, definitely.
So I am really, really grateful for that. But the podcast did help me get my voice back.
Yeah.
And it helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I was getting messages all the time, even before this documentary. Messages all the time, all over the world, from people who just that grateful.
Well, with $11 million, so with
a
few messages.
But the thing is, like, it's not just like it's a lot of people asking for help. Explaining is sad because it's happening.
Other people.
There's other people. My cousin did this to me. My best friend did this to me. Mine, I've got a horrible one that came in day before yesterday, in somebody who, and the partner for that long, then in a marriage with them, and now coming out of it and has absolutely nothing. And that's just coercive control. It's got nothing to do with catfishing, right? It's all the different. I think
facets of the story. Yeah,
that it hits people in different ways. It's heartbreaking.
Yes,
and there's a lot of the community stuff. And the documentaries had I feel like it's had an adverse effect.
The Netflix one. I have purposely not watched it because I think from what I've heard from other people and also from what I've seen from the trailer, it's very sensationalized, and I'm kind of like, nah, I'm alright. And so I purposely didn't watch it before this because I didn't want that to influence
the conversation
on my questions, and I wanted to base it on the podcast that's far more detailed and kind of fair.
I mean, it is a documentary. Everything in the documentary is true.
Yeah.
But again, the whole context isn't there. And that's what makes it.
And sometimes I think the timeline in the Netflix documentary...
It's confusing.
Yes, because there's bits where you're kind of, just like we've done, you're kind of going backwards and forwards, and then you're here and then you're there, and it doesn't...
Oh, I agree.
It doesn't lead to much clarity, I guess, is the conclusion.
The only thing I'd say with the documentary is it's like treat it like a bonus episode of the podcast.
Fine. Okay. Yeah. That's a good way of looking.
Just that's the only way I see it. Treat it like a bonus episode. You might hear. I don't know. I can't remember myself because I was interviewed for 40 hours.
Wow.
On film.
Okay.
And about sort of for 30 to 40 hours. It was like days, like long days. And I was just on camera like this.
Yeah.
And talking, and so you take from that what you will.
Yeah.
In terms of what you then got in a documentary, and other people have been interviewed and not been used, and there's only seconds of like other people's speaking when they've been
days as well.
Yeah, probably not days, even by at least hours. You know how hard it is to edit a podcast. I don't envy anybody who's had to make that documentary, but if I wouldn't have done it like. I mean, I had no control over it, so that's what people need to realize, because a lot of people think I produced it. Yeah, I come from the media world. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm a contributor.
Fine. fine. You have
So-
less input on.
So I don't have a say on how it's edited.
We do have a whole section about societal and cultural pressures, but I kind of feel like we have about 20 minutes left and we've kind of discussed it. And I don't we didn't want to go back again to that. Again, like obviously males getting involved, we've discussed, and that's absolutely fine. I think so. In 2021, you settled a civil case against him and Borgward, receiving a payout and a private apology, marking the UK's longest known catfishing case and the first successful civil claim of its kind, which in itself is historic to some degree. Unlike a criminal case, which requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is almost 99% sure, and can lead to imprisonment, a civil case is decided on the balance of probabilities, or more likely than not. So it had to be a 51% chance in a civil case. And I'm only making that clear because a lot of people don't necessarily understand the distinction between the two. And a lot of people will be like, well, if you've got a civil case, why can't you then take a criminal case? And obviously those two standards are a little bit different. How did closing the civil case impact your sense of closure of justice? Like, did you feel like, okay, we've got some end to this saga, like there's some kind of conclusion to it, and now I'm happy I can put it, but not that you can put it behind you in a sense because of how long of a time it was, but you can almost be like, all right, done, I'm moving on.
That's what I'd wanted to do with the civil case, but then once the podcast happened and then the whole... It's just been like non-stop. The police case was reopened following that.
Following the podcast?
Yeah, it was reopened. So I'd already put in a complaint to the police.
Okay.
It's in the podcast.
Yes, yeah. So the podcast itself has helped, or like almost embarrassed the police into actually looking at it?
I don't know, because I'm quite... I mean, I can't say that. They did say to me it's in the public interest, but it's... I don't know what they think. I've honestly, like, when it comes to the police, I just got no idea what's going on half the time.
Well, yeah.
Because the case is still open and we're now in 2025. And
it's been open for what, a number of years though?
Yeah, they closed it open and they couldn't. But the only reason I put in a complaint is I didn't even know if it was closed. I didn't know if it was open or closed.
Oh wow, okay. So
they just communicate.
Yeah.
And so that was the reason for doing that. And now it's evolved into something else. So I've got that open still, and I've got this open, and it doesn't seem to go away. But I do want it to go away. You know, like this whole. The only reason for doing the Netflix documentary really was given the positive response I'd had from the podcast, which doesn't seem to go away. That if it can help other people,
yep.
Because obviously Netflix has got a bigger platform.
Yeah.
But I had so many, like 60, 70 offers. Like, it was wild. It was like, I haven't gone out to sell anything to anybody. But it was like I was being hounded.
Can you give us the right steel story?
Yeah, you never saw your life rights. That was one of my deceased friends who is a playwright. One thing he told all of us in the scene, never sell your life rights. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, I didn't
imagine boy.
Keep hold of your life right always. Yeah, so that he always taught us that. So but yeah, so it was, I was being hounded. So don't get a break from it and such, and it haunts you everywhere. And now you were doing this, and when I saw the documentary before everybody else, I was, I took somebody else with me so that I wasn't being subjective in what I was saying, even though I'm good at, but people can kind of gaslight you to thinking that you're being subjective and I'm not, kind of thing. It's like I kind of predicted what would happen after seeing it, and I was a bit what the hell kind of situation. So I've had a few months to kind of make peace with what was going out there. And again, you can't always judge something before it's going to be received. I don't know how many people will listen to the podcast, but it seems like lots of them haven't.
No, I don't think, although 11 million people have listened to it, I don't think also I think the type of person who would listen to the podcast, the type of person who would watch Josh and I are very different.
They're very different people. So it's just that kind of whole scenario. So it hasn't gone away. I do want it to go away. I've always said I don't want to be an activist. I don't want to dedicate my whole life to this. Right? I don't want to.
Part of your life. It is your life.
I'm not denying it happened. Never denying it happened. Hukum is hukum, isn't it? It's just, that's how it is. And, you just
Very true.
yeah, and it happened for a reason, and the only reason I can think is to help other people. So yeah, I can't think of any other reason. So if it's there to help other people, then it's there to help other people. So that's what I called my hukum was. So I was like, did it. And if it means taking a bit of rubbish from people, then
It's all good. Yeah. So just a few questions left. I think one thing, again, was good about the Tortoise Media podcast is they use experts. One of them is a barrister, and it's a woman, which obviously helps with her understanding of being able to kind of answer what's going on. Charlotte Proudman, an expert in gender-based violence and coercive control, argues there is a strong criminal case against Simran under coercive control laws. While impersonating Bobby itself isn't illegal, using him to manipulate and control you is. Despite ample evidence, Hounslow police dismissed your concerns, failing to act. While Brighton police later acknowledged the case's severity, but cited jurisdictional issues, leaving you without justice at that point. But you said that they reopened. Hounslow police have reopened the case.
yeah.
Okay. Both forces face criticism for their inadequate response. My question from all of that is, what changes do you think need to happen to better protect the victims in catfishing incidents, but also cases of coercive control? Because I wasn't aware, I guess, before we had the conversation that actually they almost both marry up in your situation, and they're both completely different things. So you could have a catfishing without the coercive control, and likewise you could have coercive control without the catfishing. What do you think needs to change to help victims in either situation?
I think I want to say this very clearly. First of all, catfishing is a pop culture term.
Yep.
And I think we need to really think about what that term means and how we define it. Online entrapment, catfishing, fraud, any kind of fraud. It's not romantic. That catfishing is always assumed to be romantic, etc., and all that kind of thing. And so there's that. There's also the fact that catfishing happens to men and women. And actually, one study recently was 60% of catfishing victims are supposed to be men.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Any of that.
But the whole thing about it being like a women being victims of.
Yes, yeah.
The fact that 60% of, men don't speak up. And again, from the Native Immigrants podcast, we heard that 3 males in my circle were the first people that told me something serious had happened to them. Yeah. I still don't know many women in my immediate circle that it happened to, but there's 3 men.
Yeah, who I do know, yeah.
Yeah, who I do know. But did you say? So there's that. But I think safe places for victims to speak, not being judged. So that victim shaming situation just needs to be out of the window.
Yep.
Because if I was just to open your life up, I'm sure I could find a skeleton or two, right? Everyone's got skeletons. Well,
yeah.
If victim shaming is about kind of attacking people on whatever basis that you want, I have never been online and written a nasty comment to anyone. I don't understand the mentality that allows it. So there's 4 things I always talk about. So online, the world needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Like regulation online. We're talking about it a lot now. It's the last few years since the podcast came out, there's been a lot of stuff going on. In Australia, they've got laws in for kids now. We're now talking about things like banning mobile phones in schools and, having all these conversations. And I find it really interesting that China, despite having TikTok and all these apps, they have rules around these things, and it works for them.
Yeah, they manage it rather than letting it manage them.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to work because we seem to like this freedom of speech and freedom of this and freedom of everything. Freedom of speech existed before the internet. The internet, I think we need to revisit that freedom of speech thing. The policing and the legal framework. Remember, anyone doing any kind of civil case, civil lawyers, it's just business.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
it's a business.
Yeah, they see all sorts. But this is
just business. It's a way of them making money.
Yeah,
you can always resolve things without going to the civil courts, right? That should be the last resort always. And I'm saying this because I know how hard I argued with my lawyers, because I was like, you might be lawyers, but I know my case better than you.
Yeah, so and you would, yeah.
Yeah, but it's that really hard. Don't be pushed. That you have to dig your heels in. No, you really
life around.
Yeah, you really have to be strong to do this, and it's not fair. So if the police don't do something, you end up having to do it that way. You know, it is a money-making thing, and he does do that. And then there's a community element, like, you know, kind of the community, the minority community element, where we have our own system, or, you know, we have our own culture, we have our own social norms and practices, which wider society don't understand. I made certain decisions because of the way I've been raised and the way the people in my community understand it. She did certain things because she knew that too.
Aware of those vulnerabilities.
So everyone's aware of how these things work. And so then when it comes to talking about it, we shouldn't be ashamed about it.
No.
If there's something we need to really work out in our community, let's do it. I'm like, it's okay, but it's not.
Let's have those conversations.
It's not about humiliating anyone.
No.
It's not like shaming anyone. It's not about, you know, it really isn't. And yeah, that's that. And the other thing is just the last thing is the coercive control. That can happen online.
Yes.
I'm only going to put this out there very quickly. Think about revenge porn, right? That is if somebody's got that of you and until they put it online, that's when it becomes revenge porn.
Yeah.
But before that, if they're threatening you with it, they're coercively controlling you.
Yeah.
That's coercive control.
Yeah. Just a couple of questions left, but we're a few minutes over time, so if we've learned it kicked out. So obviously anyone who's listened to the documentary or watched the Netflix who's listened to the podcast or watched the documentary will have obviously known that Simran doesn't participate in either of them, and she stayed out of the public eye. For me, what I think is insane for someone who works in IT is that she somehow managed to intentionally erase any online presence or just anything, which is really interesting. There is like a random tweet for some random account linking her name to a job offer, but the problem is there's no way of verifying that is that person. Simran is really common name, and Borga is a very common surname. I'm not saying it's not that person, but equally there's no way of verifying that. So I was rather cautious when I came across that as well. Do you think it was a calculated effort to erase her online presence, or was it something in order to protect, like, as in, obviously once the podcast came out and then the documentary came out, obviously the light and the serial case, the light is going to be on you. Do you think that was in a bid to try and hide herself from any repercussions, or do you just think it was from the get-go she didn't want to leave a trail?
No, I think she was online before, like while we were making the podcast, she was online. But I think as in good journalism, you give the other side, right? You give the other person the right to report.
Yeah, your audience.
And I think in episode 4, I think I didn't know they were going to do this, because when I listened to it, I was like, what, you knocked on the door? So that's literally how little I knew about what they were doing. They knocked on the door, and
they think she's in at one point or whatever, and she's kind of hiding.
That was her voice. Because that was the first time I heard her voice since everything. I was like, oh, really, that was a massive trigger when I remember hearing it. But that whole thing, so she knew that because they'd given her, I mean, again with the Netflix document, she would know in advance. So she knew that it was going to happen. So in that period, she arranged, obviously, to...
Very thorough. Like, I mean, insanely thorough, to the point where I'm not going to say how you can do these things, but you can trace old web pages and you can pull out all sorts of stuff that people may think they've deleted. There's nothing. Like, genuinely, I tried for days to try and see if I could find it. There was just nothing. And that in itself is just interesting in the age that we live in, because everything, so much of our life is digital without us even knowing it. So, fair. I just want to get to the end of it, which is October 2024 with Glamour, you said, I don't think I've stopped living it since it happened. Every step has been a nightmare and I keep reliving it. I hope that's still not the case today, and I hope that you've worked your way through that, because that doesn't sound like a positive or healthy mindset to be in. How do you rebuild, or how did you rebuild yourself after the reality of what was happening the truth of what was going on came to kind of the forefront? And what advice would you give to others who may have gone through a similar situation? Like, when you get messages saying, my cousin's done this, or my whatever's done this, my friend's done that. Like, what is almost your response to that? Like, how do you what is your advice to those people?
Well, it depends on the scenario, but if it's like very similar to mine, the first case, it's like, go report it, dig your heels in, take somebody with you as well, because I have to be honest that they're going to probably think you're insane.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, so I'm not even going to pretend. They should know better by now. But I say that to them. Do that. Make sure you keep all your evidence. All of that, and make sure. I tell them that they only have a month. The police only have a month at the moment in which they can resurrect deleted profiles, etc. So if they don't do it within that time, they can't get them. I mean, it's not that the information's not there.
it's just their act.
It's just bureaucracy. It doesn't let them. Yeah, which is again something we need to consider. So I give them that advice, but also in terms of like going to the doctor, get counselling. I had emergency counselling, and then with my doctor directly until I got the counsellor, and then I had extended counselling, and then I had a gap. And then because I'm okay, because I'm like this all the time, when I felt like I needed more, and this is while the civil case was happening, I felt like I needed more help. And they're like, you're fine, we'll just give you antidepressants. And that was one thing I didn't do. I refused.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I refused any kind of medication. And and then I had psychotherapy. The psychotherapist was brilliant. She was brilliant, and she was really good because she works on your behaviors as well. So that was really good. But on top of that, faith.
Yeah.
So I mean, that has carried me throughout. Like even throughout when I was in it.
Yeah.
Even that made me do even though that also such a.
It's a paradox of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in it, it kept me in it because I had faith that he would resolve things or be well again. They do what ask for him as well as in his well-being, and then keeping me going through it.
To give me the energy, then like the whole.
What's all the whole blood to get through it and that whole thing, and then but when I got out of it, I was angry. It was like, why? Like, why did I do it? Judge it wrong. Yeah, I've always tried to be so good. I tried everything you see.
The time, come on.
No, it was just like I've always tried to do the right thing, and it just like really hurt. But again, it's like I always explain it in terms of having a best friend who you fought out with for a bit. Like you love each other, but you just like disagree on something, and it was like it's been like that. I mean, I did find it difficult to go to my local Gurdwara, and I was finding I was getting to every other Gurdwara I was okay, but I realized I was avoiding going to my local Gurdwara because that's where you would go every day during the thing. But
my last question: in hindsight, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing at any point during that whole period, when would it have been, and what would you have said?
Stop being so nuts.
Fair enough.
But then I wouldn't be me, right?
Yeah.
Stop. I don't know. I mean, I think not being scared of my parent, not being scared of my dad, or I wish that someone had started telling my dad and just got all funny about the divorce thing and I wish I just told him. That's, again, it's hindsight.
Yeah, hindsight is brilliant.
But yeah, I probably that not be so nice.
No.
I don't know.
I know what you mean though, in terms of like actually I should have been far more almost confrontational, almost like actually
get lost. Like more be like just get lost. Like that kind of whole.
How much more like as a group, obviously having the conversation that we've had, the timeline's far clearer, which is like the first 5 years. It's just like an acquaintance. It's not really like there is like as in.
It was acquaintance. So last year when he was when that whole shooting thing happened again, I wasn't close. Like I wasn't directly involved. My cousin was there apparently, but then they started with the girls. They started messaging me and stuff. So you're being leaned on a bit in that period, and then. Yeah, but again, I was just like, I'm just trying to have a nice time here and just like, I'm somebody that doesn't carry my phone around on me. I'm quite happy even now not carrying my phone, but I was forced to carry my phone around with me. But I would when I was with my partner, sometimes just put it away. It's like I don't want to hear it pinging.
Ignore it, uncle.
I'm really good at not answering social media. I'm really good at not
constantly checking the phone and
I'm just, I'm happy to be back in that place where I don't need my phone on me all the time. So, yeah.
Last question. Is there anything that you think we've not mentioned or discussed that you think is pertinent and you would like to include before we wrap up?
I don't think people realize the impact on health. And we talk about mental health about these kind of things, but it affects you physically. So the fact that I became a bag of bones, and initially it was, because I had no appetite because I was scared, it was operations and things. But it wasn't just that. Eventually, when I realized how skinny I was trying to eat. I was going to the doctor. I was having x-rays, chest. Like, no one knew why I was losing weight. And there was that worry about, the big C, cancer. People rapidly lose weight. And there's all those things. I was having all those checks done during the time. Then there was that pressure of like, oh, are you healthy enough to have a baby at some point? And if I've had treatment, all these things that there's used to manipulate you. And then when I came out of it, I was having those checks like 3 days later. And I went to hospital to explain. I couldn't explain why I was having certain checks because that whole scenario, the confession had happened. But you lose your hair. There's like the immediate thing of the stress lifting on you. Like there's like hormone release in your body. Your body acts differently. There's so many things that how it physically impacts you. That people go through that no one ever talks about.
You wouldn't even assume it.
Yeah. Everyone goes mental health. Physically, how it impacts you.
Because there's no physical element to it. You're almost like how,
but it does. It basically does definitely. It totally impacts you. It's that whole, it's the complications of it. I mean, I had a lump in my breast just before lockdown. And, again, when we talked about it, luckily it was
okay, good.
Dangerous. But again, when I talked about it with the consultant, he came back to what had happened.
Yeah.
And the connection, the stress. And there was the stress and the hormone release, and that's why that happened, and that's why that happened, and we'll keep an eye on it for you. And they keep an eye on it for me now. So every couple, I keep getting
checkups, yeah.
So, but that's all as a result of what happened. So you do need to really let that stress out.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Don't bottle it up.
Yeah, because it does one body, but and you do go through it all.
Obviously we're a little bit over time. Just want to say thank you so much. Like we've gone through so much and we've done a hell of a lot. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. I hope people who listen to this have learned something. I just want to wrap up with. So personally, I don't necessarily think I have to do this, but obviously there is an element of fairness that forces me to share this message, which is a response to the Tortoise Media podcast. The creators received a statement from Simon through her lawyers, which stated, the matter involves a family dispute stemming from events that occurred over a decade ago when I was a schoolgirl. As far as I'm concerned, this is a private family matter that has been resolved. I strongly object to the numerous unfounded and seriously defamatory accusations that have been made about me, as well as details of private matters that have been shared with the media. I'm not going to comment any further. I'm going to leave it at that. Everyone listening can make of that what they want. And hopefully you have enjoyed this. And if you have, like, subscribe and all the rest of it. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. That was certainly an eye-opening conversation with her. Kirat. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this discussion insightful, hit that like button, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into history, true crime and untold stories. Thanks for watching Ramblings of a Sea. See you in the next episode.